And I'm delighted today to be joined by the entire show, the award-winning historian, broadcaster and author Rafe Heydel-Mankoo of the New Culture Forum. But first, I want to bring in the independent journalist Lewis Brackpool, who we just saw there reveal some big news about Axel Rudakabana behind bars from Tommy Robinson, also behind bars. So Lewis, absolutely fascinating insight. And you are convinced that Tommy Robinson is aware, given the cells were in such close proximity, that Axel Rudakabana is able to attend mosque within Belmarsh prison.
So just to start with, this is, of course, all just allegations from Mr. Robinson. I, of course, stressed that in the video. This particular report was mainly focusing on Tommy Robinson's prison conditions. As we heard, he's obviously been moved from Belmarsh to Woodhill, and I could communicate with him via the email a prisoner website.
Got it.
After he mentioned the information regarding Southport, I then saw that and thought, okay, well, that's clearly quite big information. I need to seek legal advice before, of course, sharing anything, of course, talking about anything, because a lot of journalists are on edge with regards to this subject, understandably.
Yeah, they think that you just can't talk about it at all. They just think it's easier to follow what the Speaker of the House has told MPs. Let's just not say anything at all about Axel Rudakabana or the cover-up. And actually, that's not true. You can talk about it. You just have to be careful, don't you?
Correct. This is absolutely correct. And I'm being as careful as possible. So I consulted lawyers to ask about the given message, and it got the green light, and we spoke about it, and it revealed some information about life in imprisonment, and this is apparently across the board. This is a standard procedure for institutions such as this, where inmates are able to attend worship services and, of course, on top of that, have a job. Now, you compare that with Mr. Robinson and his solitary confinement treatment, and it shows a clear two-tier injustice in that respect. And I think that's what Tommy Robinson was alluding to in his messages. I'm planning to try and visit Mr. Robinson during his incarceration or during his imprisonment to obviously have a conversation, because after I followed up with 4 other messages, each message I had to word carefully, take bits out just in case it might get screened or, blocked. And it kept happening. I kept having messages blocked by either the governor or the prison screening process, because each message that is sent out via you or via the person that you're speaking to, the recipient, is always screened by a governor and is always looked over just in case there are any material that could be incriminating. So that was allowed to be sent to me. But my response is saying, look, I cannot disclose anything to the public just as yet. I need to consult a lawyer. I need to consult, go through the legal side first before obviously talking about it. But even that was being blocked. So it shows that clearly something is going on. I don't even want to try and allude to what is going on, because that's how frightened people are right now because of what is happening.
Okay, but it looks like, based on what you're saying and based on the fact that Tommy Robinson, I mean, absolutely incredible, was breaking news as a citizen journalist from behind bars. It looks like as a result of that, they have now limited his communication with journalists like you, although of course we can't say for absolutely certain. But Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, isn't it astonishing that it is Tommy Robinson who is able to reveal that Axel Rudakabana is attending mosque behind bars? Now remember, Rafe, we only knew from the police very recently that he had been charged with terror offences. Up until that point, the official narrative was that the guy isn't Muslim, that he hasn't converted to Islam. Yet there he is in Belmarsh prison attending mosque.
Yes, if true, the allegations will be astounding to many. To some of us, however, perhaps not so surprising at all. But let's be clear here. It is not sub judice to ask what our Prime Minister and our Home Secretary and the police knew in terms of this Al Qaeda material, the possession allegedly of ricin in the house, what they knew and when they knew it. And this terrible legal requirement that we have here in the UK not to discuss aspects of an investigation publicly for fear of prejudicing the trial, it's not the case in other countries, and it's consistently used and abused by politicians and others to conveniently sidestep questions. That's why Starmer and Cooper can get away with not responding to legitimate questions, including by MPs like Nigel Farage, whereas, of course, they were perfectly happy to condemn the Southport protesters as far-right thugs, even for the Home Office to call these protesters criminals before they were ever convicted. That was fine. And yet, for some reason, they are silent on this. We need to know what they knew and when they knew it. Because if it actually does turn out to be the case that despite saying it wasn't a terrorist incident, they knew about the possession of these materials, and yet they knowingly condemned people for telling the truth, and they knowingly allowed these people to be convicted and in many cases imprisoned for telling the truth, well, then it really will be one of the greatest scandals we've ever experienced in this country. And in normal times, that would definitely be a question for prime ministerial resignation, if not the collapse of an entire government.
Indeed, indeed. But the problem that I have, Lewis, and it's so fascinating to me that here we are relying on independent journalism, independent shows like this, independent journalists like you, because as Rafe points out very clearly, it would be absolutely possible for a mainstream journalist to ask the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary what they knew about the charges against Axel Ruda-Cabana and when they knew it. And not one journalist has done so, Lewis, even though Keir Starmer in particular there's been multiple opportunities. I mean, he's just been on a plane, for example, to Rio de Janeiro, surrounded by the press pack. Not one question. So, Lewis, I would argue that the mainstream media are as in on this cover-up as the government.
Yeah, you could be genuinely correct there. I think the problem is now you see mainstream journalists, they take a course and then they join a big corporation or a big media company, and then they just get part of the system. They just join the system. It's like I can't even explain it. It's like glue. They go near it and they just stick. And then after that, they don't become journalists. They become mouthpieces. It's not the same. That at the end of the day, I went out and I sourced my information. I went out and I went and spoke to Robinson, and I know a lot of mainstream media journalists wouldn't even dare to do such a thing because of their prejudices or biases or whatever. But asking about conditions in prison and then stumbling upon information that is unbelievable, I say unbelievable, quote unquote, it just shows that independent journalism is so needed in times like these. Citizen journalism is the most important factor or antidote to corrupt mainstream journalism now in 2024 in modern times. So I encourage more people to get involved in citizen journalism because we need it more now, more than ever before.
Indeed. But that's why Starmer sent, well, I don't say Starmer directly, but the system that Starmer is in charge of sent down Cameron Bell, the 23-year-old care worker, simply for streaming what was going on after some of that unrest onto TikTok. By the way, I just want to quickly show you another part of this interview with Nigel Farage. It's caused quite a lot of agitation, this interview, in terms of Nigel's positioning on Islam in particular. But he does seem to have moved a little bit to the right post the election of Donald Trump on the issue of mass deportation. So I'll get both of your reaction, but let's just look first to what Nigel had to say.
That we can't deport from Britain because there's no political will. When I hear J.D. Vance, he says it's not political will, it's practicality. For them, how on earth could they possibly deport 21 to 25 million people?
Well, I get that. I get that point. Of course, there's practicality with everything in politics and in life. But what would I do with those crossing the English Channel today? They're gone. Deport immediately.
Yeah.
Can you deport everybody that's come in the last 25 years illegally? Well, yeah. Then you've reached the ground of practicality, obviously.
So then my question would be, there are, according to at least one report, 1.2 million illegal people in Britain, illegal migrants. Would you give them amnesty?
No.
So what would you do?
Never, ever give amnesties.
So Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, this interview has caused a lot of consternation because, of course, Nigel does make it clear that he's not advocating for the destruction of Islam. However, can you take some hope in the fact that he has moved his position on this issue of mass deportations from the interview earlier this year with Stephen Edgington of GB News, where he ruled them out?
Yes, many of the issue here ultimately is that the Reform Party needs to actually come out with clear policy statements. And unfortunately, we're not getting that. All we're getting are off-the-cuff remarks made by Nigel Farage, which vary from one podcast to another. And of course, you take the clips and of course, people then get rather irate. We need to have, and we're being failed by them for not actually telling us precisely what they want to do. Look, the discussion about mass deportations has moved everywhere except in this country. Nigel Farage and Reform are to the left now of even mainstream politicians in Europe. I mean, for heaven's sake, you have the Swiss, the Finns, the Hungarians all discussing mass deportations. You have the Swedish government talking about voluntary repatriation. They're calling it remigration, by offering 3,000 kroner to each person who will go back to their country of origin, even if they're a naturalized citizen, not just illegal immigrants. And if you're a family of 5, 3 times 5, that's quite a decent amount of money. Of course, now you have President Trump. He's even used the word remigration. We're not ready for those conversations quite yet in this country, it seems like, but the Overton window is shifted everywhere, and it won't be long before we're able to actually fully have those conversations here in the UK. And Nigel Farage needs to be very careful that he is at the forefront of those discussions. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of voters who will be looking elsewhere for that.
Lewis, were you one of those people who were disappointed in Nigel in terms of his comments about needing to work with Islam, given its growing impact on our population?
I think just echoing what Rafe said, I think there needs to be a clear message. And it seems to be that Reform are kind of pitter-pattering over lots and lots of different issues, but yet is not making it clear. And I'm kind of getting a bit tired, if I'm totally honest, to go back to everything that Farage was, of course, originally he said that I'm not going to go down the route of mass deportations or any of these issues. And then now, after Trump being elected, thank God, it's now seemed to have shifted his mind towards the possibility, even though he originally said that it was an impossibility. So there's quite clearly, there's not a clear message here. So echoing the statement from the gentleman earlier, it's important that Reform must come out with a complete clear messaging and that everyone is on board with that sense. And I sense that a lot of people are scratching their heads at the minute thinking, where is this party going? We elected these guys as the opposition to Labour and Conservative because both of them have moulded into the same party. Yet there's flip-flop already, and they've only just been elected. So clear messaging, clear statement of policy, and a sense of direction, and giving voters reassurance that their vote counted.
Indeed. Well, look, keep up the brilliant work, Lewis Brackpool. Your great independent journalism available from your YouTube channel. There it is, Lewis Brackpool. Thank you so much for being here today. Breaking right now, James O'Brien has been caught lying over his threatened departure from X. Just as it emerges, he receives preferential treatment from the UK government censor, The Off Communists. So James O'Brien posted on X over the weekend, "Don't think I'll be here much longer, and I never need replies." Well, immediately a community note was proposed on that post saying James O'Brien frequently blocks accounts on here, therefore proving he must read replies, as he admitted to in August 2024. Piers Morgan weighed in on James O'Brien's imminent departure from Elon Musk's platform, writing these squealy wokies all running away because they just realised nobody agrees with them anymore are so funny. But interestingly, this scrutiny of James O'Brien does not extend to his show on LBC, the Labour Broadcasting Company. The Stark Naked Brief has done some really good work on this, and I want to share it with you now. They write, in response to a Freedom of Information request in July this year, Ofcom, our broadcasting regulator, revealed that between 2020 and May 2024, they've received 926 complaints involving O'Brien. You'd expect that our regulator would have investigated him at least once, but you'd be wrong. Ofcom have not carried forward not one complaint. In contrast, when Mark Steyn provoked 4 complaints for his April 2022 broadcast where he talked about the government's own vaccine efficacy data, he was found to be in breach of Rule 2.2 of the Broadcasting Code. Note, Ofcom also took the position that they did not have to investigate either the safety or efficacy of the COVID vaccines in order to find Stein's interpretation misleading. It's nonsensical to say the least. In a recent broadcast, O'Brien stated that anyone denying Trump is a fascist is a liar. The host has reached 1.46 million weekly listeners before, and he's telling his audience that one of America's most outspoken supporters of free speech is a dictator. It is unknown if Ofcom received any complaints over this, but that could also be very easily argued to be materially misleading. Yet Ofcom is nowhere to be seen. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. This is an extraordinary piece of journalism, again, from the independent media, from the Stark Naked Brief, because it shows you, doesn't it, that the off-communists don't give a damn about materially misleading information coming from James O'Brien because it doesn't suit their political purposes. They just want to silence right-wingers like Mark Steyn, like myself, like Lawrence Fox.
Well, what a surprise that in two-tier Britain we also have two-tier regulators. I mean, this is shocking, but it shouldn't shock anyone, actually. None of us should be surprised by any of these stories now when they come out, because we see the evidence every day almost. Look, just remember, GB News was fined £100,000 for allowing our Prime Minister of this country a platform, despite the fact that they also offered Keir Starmer a similar platform, which he turned down. Yet Ofcom had no problem at all with Keir Starmer having his own show on LBC called Call Keir. For some reason, that was perfectly fine. There was no issue with that at all. You know, everyone knows that GB News is no more biased than the BBC or Channel 4. If anything, it's less biased, more impartial than Channel 4.
Absolutely.
Because more GB News viewers voted for the Labour Party than Channel 4 voters voted for the Conservative Party. But the big question is, why does Ofcom still exist? This was a creation of Tony Blair. It hasn't been there for ages. And yet again, the Conservative Party consistently have failed to reverse Labour's long march through the institutions. Never repealed the Human Rights Act, never repealed the Equalities Act, both of which could have enabled us to actually send people to Rwanda and so forth much more easily. Never got rid of Ofcom. You know, this is just further evidence of the uniparty being entrenched as the established system in this country.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. I mean, 926 complaints, not one investigation. I'm going to say that James O'Brien is a protected species because the guy pumps out more hatred, more misinformation than anything you've ever seen on GB News. Now, my position on this, though, like you, Rafe, is far more nuanced. I mean, I'm actually saying there should be no regulation. James O'Brien should be able to say whatever he wants. He should be able to spread his lies, but we should be able to call him out. But of course, the irony is you've got the left who are completely obsessed with censorship and so disturbed by free speech that they're all running off to this platform, Blue Sky. So what I'm about to show you from LBC over the weekend is gross. It's disgusting, but I just want to clarify, I'm actually not calling on them to face any state sanctions. I just think people should switch off. And the person in question is actually someone, Rafe, who, I mean, I don't think he's worse than James O'Brien, but he comes close. He's a guy called Matthew Wright. He's one of the most unpleasant men in the media. I had the misfortune of working with him on talk radio, and the guy is absolutely unpleasant, revolting to his staff members. But actually, it's his political positioning that I want to call out today. There were two instances over the weekend, so I'm going to bring them both to you, and then I'll get your reaction off the bat, Rafe. So first up, this is what Matthew Wright had to say about Britain's farmers.
Most farmers voted for Brexit. Had they not, this country wouldn't be £100 billion a year worse off as far as trade with the EU goes, and Rachel Reeves wouldn't necessarily be looking at taxing family farms to make up the difference, which ultimately, people aren't going to like the question, but it does beg the question whether farmers are simply reaping what they sowed. You can't look at the issue of family taxes or inheritance tax on family farms. You can't look at it separately from Brexit, because the costs of Brexit are hurting this country and the Chancellor's trying to make up that difference.
And he wasn't finished there. Listen to Matthew Wright. I actually can't believe I'm even going to say this. Matthew Wright compared the new US Health Secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., to Adolf Hitler.
And stuff like that is a good thing. It's good to have people in government who question things.
Even though 83 kids died in Samoa.
Oh, let's not focus on that.
Let's not focus on the facts.
No, well, all right.
Okay.
Well, let's focus on the facts, such as how AstraZeneca has now been shelved. Let's focus on the facts that the Sackler family, the amount of lives destroyed in America because of Big Pharma.
That's opioids, which has got nothing to do with vaccines.
Let me speak.
Well, no, not if you're going to talk rubbish, Katie, because it's only a 3-hour show. We've got to have some basis in reality.
Who questions Big Pharma
right.
is
okay,
good.
Big Pharma. Questioning Big Pharma is great, Katie, but he questions vaccines, the science of vaccines, which is lunacy.
Some of what he says is good. The way he cleaned up the pollution in the Hudson River is amazing.
I'm sure Adolf Hitler was very nice to children. It doesn't mean that he was a good man, though, does he?
I mean, absolutely nuts. Bev Turner, who's also had the misfortune of working with Matthew Wright, posted on X, the definition of unintelligent is someone who refuses to learn. I'm ashamed of the media in this country when I think that this putrid fool was once one of our most prolific newspaper journalists. How can someone with such a closed mind have such a platform? He's clearly learned nothing. Rafe, I mean, again, let me just stress, I'm not calling for James O'Brien to be taken off air or to suffer from any type of state sanctions. But I mean, this is the type of hate. And this is the type of, I mean, I hate actually the term misinformation. I'll just call it as I see it. These are the types of lies that we see spread from LBC every single week.
It's the hypocrisy, it's the double standards here. I mean, you know, James O'Brien and Matthew Wright are they're the grand poobahs of that sort of most insidious type of, you know, vainglorious pseudo-intellectual, you know, snobs who are completely vindictive to anyone that they regard as being the opposition or the enemy, and so convinced of their moral, you know, and intellectual superiority that they just condescend, as you heard there, and as James O'Brien does all the time, condescend and patronize anyone who contradicts them. And, you know, they're keen to leave X and go to this Blue Sky because they think that X has now become an unpleasant place. You know, far more unpleasant place is the LBC studio. The way that James O'Brien and Matthew Wright humiliate anybody who calls in with a contrary viewpoint. I mean, the level of intolerance that is shown there puts any of our posts on X in the shade. And yet, of course, they can't see any of that. The reason that we're having this great exodus to Blue Sky is because they simply can't handle free speech. They want a
Yes.
platform that censors. And actually, it's been reported now that Blue Sky has had a record number of blocking of harmful content. One person posted that there are only 2 genders, just for stating that biological fact was blocked. That's the sort of world that people like Matthew Wright and
but
James O'Brien want.
the censors of Blue Sky are unable to keep up. Now, by the way, I'm not going on Blue Sky. I have no interest on being on an anti-free speech platform, on a pro-censorship platform. No thanks. It also sounds a bit degenerate. Let me share you this post. Which was someone who was trying to talk up Blue Sky, but it just made it sound horrendous. David Abbott wrote, Blue Sky was a haven for marginalized communities before the exodus from Twitter. The LGBTQIA+, black, sex workers, and furries communities were here early. They found a place where they could be themselves without judgment. So it sounds like all of that's fine, but if you go on and express a view, like, as Rafe says, that there's 2 genders, you're immediately booted off. Chris Packham is also heading to Blue Sky. He released this video.
It's grey sky up there. It's very grey, to be quite honest with you. But I've moved to Blue Sky. I've opened an account. I'm going to be posting on there as well as I'm posting on X for the time being. So log on to Blue Sky and find me on there for all the latest news about what we're getting up to and what's happening in the world that's both good and sometimes not quite so good, but we're going to fix it.
Oh, goodness me, Rafe. Even more reason for me not to go. I mean, these lefties are pathetic, aren't they? They are utterly pathetic. They were completely happy being on Twitter when Twitter was their left-wing echo chamber. X is not a right-wing echo chamber. It simply allows us to be there like they are there, and they cannot handle it. And this is why they lose elections around the world.
Precisely, they're so out of touch. I mean, where have the people on the left been protesting about being censored and blocked on Twitter? You never hear anyone say on the left saying that they were actually banned from X, do you? It is a genuinely legitimate free speech platform. And that's what terrifies them, because they want another Facebook, they want another Instagram, a place, you know, where unpleasant truths are silenced, a place where reality is subverted. It's sort of a la-la fantasy land they want to live in, a state called denial, if I can put it that way. So we must, you know, thank God for Elon Musk and X. But I'm just curious as to how long it will be before they come crawling back to X, when they realize, of course, that there is no greater platform for spreading your message. And so I think many of those people will actually end up inevitably coming back onto a platform like X. And we just all have to actually thank God we do have that, because if it wasn't for Elon Musk giving us the unadulterated full news rather than the curated versions of the news we get on mainstream media and elsewhere, we wouldn't know any of the stories we've been discussing today.
Totally.
Regarding Southport and so forth.
Totally. Well, think how hard it was for me to do my job during COVID, for example, when I would try to talk about the lab leak or masks not being effective, whatever it was. And I would be censored from one big tech platform to the next. And sometimes it meant actually that you were too nervous about having these discussions because you wanted to maintain your platform for obvious reasons, because otherwise you were out of the discussion altogether. So no, thank God for X. But I promise you, I have no intention of going to Blue Sky. I will not go to a platform that believes in censorship. Now,
Rafe, how long would we last anyway?
Yeah, well, indeed. They would probably get rid of me before I had a chance, actually. Rafe, Heydel-Mankoo, don't go anywhere, because in just 1 minute time, we have a big development on the case of the Asian men who attacked the police at Manchester Airport. We'll hear from Nigel Farage on this in just 1 minute. But first, I love the holidays. It's my favourite time of year in so many ways, but I can think that these days it's a little bit demanding. You know, all the dinners, all the gift buying, all the planning. And as I get older, I will admit that I tend to burn out a little bit quicker each festive season. But not this year. I don't plan to burn out at all, Because while getting older is inevitable, feeling older isn't. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in our cells by taking something called NMN. NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health, improve blood pressure, regulate blood sugar levels, and support many other health markers. Finding high-quality pure NMN is hard, so I use Verso. They conduct third-party testing for each batch produced to guarantee you get what you paid for. It contains the highest quality NMN and other research-backed ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down aging. After taking Celbene for some time, I feel like a younger version of myself. I've noticed more energy, enhanced endurance, improved cognition, fat loss, better sleep, and if I do get a cold, I recover faster. So click on the link in the description on YouTube and Rumble, or head on over to buy.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout. You will save a whopping 15% on your first order. So I'm just going to repeat the address: www.buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code outspoken. But now, back to the show. And breaking right now, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and Richard Tice have said they will launch a private prosecution against the men accused of assaulting police officers, including a female police officer who was so badly attacked that her nose was broken and she ended up in prison. This is the announcement that Farage has made in the past few hours.
Riots led to immediate arrests and, in some cases, imprisonment, not just for those that threw bricks, but for those who said things online. Yet, the appalling attack on police officers at Manchester Airport has been completely ignored. We think, as Reform UK, this is as clearer illustration of two-tier policing, two-tier justice in two tiers Britain.
Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, Richard Tice then went on GB News to speak about his plans a little bit further. Watch this.
And our view is, and we gave them notice back on October the 7th, our view is that this was of sufficient gravity, that it is in the public interest. We think a crime may possibly have been committed, and we're obviously careful about the lawyers and all that good stuff. But this looks a very serious incident, and actually our police officers, who they stand in harm's way, they protect us, mostly when they're unarmed. In this case, some of them were armed. They have a right to feel that the law will protect them in the event that there's a serious incident taken place. And so we think that a crime may have taken place and it is in the public interest, and that's the threshold. So if the Crown Prosecution Service are not going to do it, we think that it's incumbent upon us to start a private criminal prosecution.
Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, is this the right decision by Farage, Tice and Reform UK?
I think it's a brilliant decision. We cannot live in a two-tier society. We must never live in a two-tier society. And unfortunately, that is the impression that the great British public believe is the case. And so I actually do welcome this. The question is, how far will this get? And it should be said, putting on, I have discussed this with barristers actually before, it is the case that the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, is currently investigating the police's conduct in this manner. And there is, a lot of reason why the CPS wouldn't act in terms of the suspects accused of attacking the police officers until the IOPC conclude their investigation. And so it's not that unusual that the CPS should take this long to come forward. But what I would say is, this is the correct decision of Nigel Farage, because given the state of feeling in this country, given the feeling that there is a two-tier society here, 4 months after these attacks took place, for still nothing to be said or nothing to come out from the CPS, no charges to be laid, no even reports of an investigation going on, that's where public trust in our institutions fails. And public trust is the predominant and must be the predominant interest of our institutions to ensure that we don't have that trust eroded any further. And so I think, given the lack of statement, given the lack of any forthcoming from the CPS, I think having their hand forced by reform in this way is absolutely splendid.
Absolutely, because the thing is, Rafe, we have seen that when there is political pressure, for example, with the so-called rioters or the people posting on Facebook or Twitter, to hell with process, to hell with any norms. In fact, the legal system, the judicial system can work at warped speed. Yet here's a case where there is clear public interest. It received just as much coverage as the so-called riots after the Southport massacre, and it's the opposite of warp speed. It's going at snail's pace. And of course, so much of this, Rafe, so much of this is about scaring folk into not saying anything. And Nigel spoke about how at the moment that strategy from Starmer is looking like a success. Watch this.
His regime of fear has worked. It has shut people up. People are really scared. People that I've spoken to in and around Southport, relatives of those who've been involved in some way, are all too scared to speak in public.
Yeah.
So he was effective.
Yeah.
His reign of terror, as it were, was effective, but it won't last forever.
Yeah. He says there's no such thing as two-tier policing. Even Priti Patel says there's no such thing as two-tier policing. Is he wrong?
It's two-tier. I mean, what's happened to the Manchester attackers?
Rafe, isn't it fascinating? Because I think, sadly, Nigel is right. And what we have been seeing with Alison Pearson is not just actually now scaring ordinary folk, journalists, commentators, public figures are becoming too scared to speak out.
You're absolutely right, and Nigel is completely correct. You have Starmer and, Starmer's Stasi, the police now creating essentially a feeling whereby even if you are a respected national journalist, you have to think twice about what you say and what you post. And why is this? I mean, the reality is that, and there can be no more damning indictment of mass immigration and multiculturalism, that it can only be by silencing free speech and by suppressing our freedoms and restricting our freedoms that you can actually have mass immigration and multiculturalism, because that's ultimately what this boils down to. All of these attempts to suppress free speech come down to criticisms of the policies of multiculturalism and mass immigration, which lead, unfortunately, to increased incidents of the sorts that we're discussing today. It's extremely sinister stuff. Remember, Keir Starmer is not a politician. He is a prosecutor. He came to politics very late in life, in his 50s. This is a man who sees the world in terms of punishment, in terms of law, in terms of enforcement. And that's something that should strike a chill through all of our hearts, because, of course, it runs completely contrary to all the principles of liberty for which this land ultimately became the progenitor for the entire world through Magna Carta from 1215. And we have never seen such an authoritarian, draconian regime as, unfortunately, we're now being subjected to.
And of course, there are real human consequences as well. And we've seen that with Alison Pearson, who wrote over the weekend on X. Lots of people told me they too have endured this Kafkaesque nightmare, but were too ashamed to tell family or friends. It can be very scary and isolating. People could take their own lives. And we've seen this weekend feminist figures like Julie Bindel talk about the fact that they got a call from the police. Joey Barton, I watched your brilliant interview on his podcast, Rafe, recently, and he wrote, I've been interviewed 3 separate times for over 2 hours per sitting about tweets I've made under the Malicious Communications Act. One was about a photo I posted and a joke I made. 8 CID officers knocked at my door to intimidate my wife and kids for 4 days straight looking for me. I was also arrested in front of 3 of my children and spent an overnight in the police cells for those same tweets. This is modern Britain. Anyone who says it isn't becoming a police state is a liar and out of touch with reality. A difference in political opinion can cause the state and the state stooges like the Met Police to attempt to harass, bully, intimidate, and arrest you. Elon Musk is correct. Britain is a policed state with a two-tiered justice system corrupt to its very core. And as I say, I watched your interview with Joey Barton. I know he's a controversial guy, but I think he says lots of great stuff. Some stuff I disagree with, but the point is, he's being criminalized, Rafe, for speaking, for sharing views that actually loads of people share. It's outrageous.
Whether you are, whether you're Lawrence Fox, whether you're Joey Barton, whether you're Narendra Kaur calling people coconut, no opinion should be so offensive that it becomes a police matter. I'm terribly sorry. I'm a free speech advocate, and I'm not biased in my view. I think everybody should be entitled to free speech. The more genuinely bad or wrong or hateful someone's idea, the more free speech there should be to counter those ideas. That's the way you deal with people's comments on the internet and everywhere. We've had a great experiment in this country of supervising and policing free speech, and it's been a complete and unmitigated failure. And it's difficult to see where this will end when you even have Tory councillors, as you have in Tory police commissioners, as you have in Essex, dealing with Alison Pearson, who are on the same side of Starmer's Stasi in terms of suppressing all of this thing. We should all be very afraid by this because, of course, as you've said, decent people who are the great majority of this country, who have common sense, who are expressing majority opinions, no longer feel that they can express those opinions. They're being cowed into submission by the vocal minority. I have said many, many times, and it's my main sort of platform, Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. The evidence is all around us, not least in the way that we have lost our free speech.
Yeah, so terrifying, so true. Interesting, Rafe, that you mentioned Narendra Kaur, because she sparked a lot of issues last week. I had her on the show regarding her post about Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the fact that she looked like she was aging, not referencing the fact that she's just gone through 6 months of really terrible chemotherapy. But Narendra, I think, is now being intellectually dishonest about the backlash to that, because as you make the point, Rafe, we're not trying to criminalize the woman. We're not trying to say that she should be arrested as a result of her post or that she should be deplatformed. We're just saying it's not very nice. We're prepared to have a discussion about it. But Narendra used the response that she had received over the week to compare to the response that Alison Pearson had received. And you won't be surprised, Rafe, tried to turn it into an issue of race. Watch this.
The past couple of days has also been very revealing. I don't make excuses for my tweet. And then what's happened with Alison Pearson, whatever her tweet is, I don't know. I don't know why the police came round, whether it was illegal, whether she broke any laws. I know mine didn't. But the hypocrisy of the right, who attacked me in the most horrific way. And I mean sexual threats, sexual humiliation, misogyny. Racism was last on the list. I handle that every single day. And how dare I, etc., etc., etc. I mean, it's boring. And I lived in hell with that. And yet the very same people are defending Alison's right to freedom of speech, Alison's right to, whatever she can tweet or whatever she can say, but not my rights. I don't have that right. Again, I'm not saying my tweet was correct or anything. I just think that the hypocrisy is staggering. It's hurtful. It's an eye-opener. I should know better. But I don't know whether it's the hypocrisy of the right or whether it's just white woman can say what she wants, brown woman can't.
Oh, Rafe. I don't know if Narendra's learned anything from her little appearance with me. I'll leave that one to you, Rafe. You can respond.
Well, you said that she was being intellectually disingenuous. You know, you have to have an intellect to be intellectually disingenuous, and I'm terribly sorry, but I think she's been rather lacking on that front, given everything she said. And I've crossed swords with her many times to my chagrin over the years. I mean, you know, nobody has criminalized Narinder Kaur's, you know, horrendous attack on the Princess of Wales. She wasn't visited by the police over her scurrilous remarks. And let's put this into context. Alison Pearson was standing up for Jewish people for a great cause, not engaged in the most petty, low type of personal attack, which Narinder was engaged in. And isn't it typical of the left? The left who fire a broadside, who make a completely uncalled for, nasty remark, then revert immediately to victim status. Oh, this is misogynist. It's because I'm a woman. It's because I'm brown. It is the last refuge of a scoundrel to resort to that sort of a thing. And it just goes to show, actually, you know, where the true nastiness lies. It's with the Be Kind Brigade.
Yes, it always is. So beautifully put, Rafe. So brilliant to have you back on Outspoken. And I have to recommend that everyone goes to follow Rafe's brilliant YouTube channel. There it is. All of his other media appearances, speeches, and the likes there. And of course, you can also find Rafe via the New Culture Forum as well. Always love having you, Rafe. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And a real exciting update, actually. I've just heard this. You may have known, if you were with us on Friday, that I put out a real plea to the Outspoken family to support my former GB News colleague, Mark Stein, who is in a battle with the off-communists who are demanding £144,000 from him. They want to ruin the guy. And the court has ordered that he has to pay £50,000 or 64,000 US dollars by tomorrow. And you have been utterly, utterly incredible all weekend long with so much support. And look at this. I've just been told in the past few minutes that Mark has now reached the target, 64,000 US dollars he needed. And you have now raised for Mark $64,908. 918 of you supported, 229 of you shared, 20 of you offered Mark your prayers. And I just want to thank everyone, because we're a family at Outspoken. Mark Stein is part of that family. He did the most incredible work, and you might know he suffered from 2 heart attacks. He's refusing to back down, and boy, he shouldn't back down against the government censors, the off-communists. And thank you so much for supporting Mark Stein. I know that he is so touched by all of you who donated. And I should just stress, this crowdfunding campaign had nothing to do with Mark. It was set up by the friends of Mark Stein. Mark's a very proud man. He would never ask for this, but I know he's been completely overwhelmed and touched by the massive amount of support received. So thank you so much. Now, we've got lots more coming up today in the uncancelled after show. Brittany from the Royal News Network, she's the editor, in the house, and she's going to be talking and revealing all about this unhinged new red carpet appearance from Meghan Markle, plus a major security threat at Windsor Castle, which could have put the lives of Catherine, Prince William, and their young family at threat. So you know it's very important to me that we have a safe space not patrolled by big tech, so that's why you can now watch the uncancelled after show every single weekday on my Substack. www.outspoken.live is where you can sign up. All you need to do is sign up for a paid monthly membership from just £5 a month. Then you get access not only to all my columns and exclusive journalism, and also the opportunity to speak to me directly, but you also get the uncancelled after show every single day. You can either stream it live immediately after the show ends via the app, or it's available daily on demand in beautiful high definition by 7:30 p.m. UK time. So at this stage, we come off Rumble and YouTube, we move to our own platform to continue the conversation in the uncancelled after show. All you have to do is sign up at www.outspoken.live. I'm back tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Very, very big day here in the UK tomorrow. Go the farmers. I will be covering that big farmers protest on Westminster. So you're going to want to be here. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. I promise to keep fighting for you, but hope to see you on Substack with the uncancelled after show in just one moment.